calling the meeting of the Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee to order. Present are Councilmember Price and myself, Paul Koretz, the chair. And we will begin with public comment.
Caller with the last four numbers 8700. Would you please unmute yourself by pressing *6, and then tell us your name and the item that you wish to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 8700. Okay, doesn't seem to be there. Caller with the last four numbers 4333. Would you please unmute yourself by pressing *6 and tell us your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
And I'd note for the record that Councilmember Lee has joined us, so we now have the full complement of committee members present.
Please, if I ask you to unmute yourself, please press *6 to do so. Caller with the last four numbers 1486, please press *6 to unmute yourself. And then let us know your name and the item that you wish to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 3715, please press *6 to unmute yourself. And then let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on.
Could we be having some sort of technical difficulty because we don't seem to have any of our callers responding?
Yes, I think that's happening. Caller with the last four numbers 1486, please press *6 to unmute yourself, and then let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 8700, please press *6 to unmute yourself. And let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 1108, please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, it's can you hear me okay?
Let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on.
Great, it's Daniel Gus, 11, 12, 13, and general.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
In total?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Starting my clock. Okay, gentlemen, for the item number 11, going over the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, federal page. My primary concern about this item is that if you enter into an employment arrangement with people who may or may not be legally allowed to work here, the city of Los Angeles could be jeopardizing any future application for citizenship. So while I obviously don't know the intricacies of this, I would caution the city to be hypersensitive to what it's addressing here, because it could inadvertently cause harm to future citizenship applicants in the event they were not allowed to work and the city of Los Angeles gave them work. That said, item number 12, as you know, I have great concerns about this from numerous points. First, what is the business case for this project altogether? As you may know, I was a high-level senior proposal writer for KPMG and Arthur Anderson, and in order to award a contract, let alone one for this quantity of the balance in this animal welfare trust fund, there has to be a legitimate business case, and I don't see it made anywhere or scrutinized. Much like the qualifications of the people at the glue, I'm sure they're fine people, but look at their website. Where are the qualifications and the results in marketing, in fundraising, in public relations, in website development? Where is the history? We did this for CVS, and we brought them this much more revenue. Where is this that we did for Ralph's Supermarket, and we helped them in this way? Where is the quantified results for this project? I don't see the business reason for this project, and I don't see the qualifications of this vendor, and something doesn't feel right. It makes no sense. And that money, I'll move on to my general public comment, but that money should be used for things like item number 13, keeping the West Valley Animal Pound, and I don't call it a shelter, I call it a pound, open. Or instead of closing West Valley, reducing the services instead at each of the animal services locations. It is a bad idea to shut down or alter the business, the government function at West Valley. Why not spread it around, keep the facility open? I'm telling you, there will be far less sense of bewilderment and mistrust in city council if you spread around reduced services rather than getting rid of this one facility in whatever is being proposed. Thanks for considering this, and I'll listen to the rest of the meeting. Thanks again.
Thank you. Caller with the last four numbers 4333. Would you please press *6 to unmute yourself, and then let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on.
Hi, my name is Whitney Smith. Can you hear me?
Yes. You have 3 minutes.
I would like to speak on item 12, 13 in general.
Okay.
I'm going to echo Dan Getz's comments about what is the business case for this project with the glue. I have done a lot of research on the glue. If you look at their Instagram post, it looks like a vanity project. They did a videotape for Denise Austin many years ago. That's about as close as you can get to sort of PR. There's zero fundraising that I can see. And also, I went back to review General Manager Barnett's original application. Her resume specifically cites her incredible abilities at fundraising. So I don't understand why we would be spending over $1 million on this small company. Doesn't even list the people by name. I can't even look up the people behind it, which is very curious. And it has low traffic, and their projects have nothing to do with animals or interfacing with the public. As for West Valley, it's just quantifiably obvious that the Valley needs their own facility. They need it. There's no justifiable resource issue to close it entirely, and this is all orchestrated by General Manager Barnett. For what reasons, we are all left in the dark, but the community has spoken very clearly, and the animals need this facility for their use. So that is my opinion about that, and I don't understand why the people keep speaking, and it doesn't seem to be heard at all. Particularly the Valley, which is a huge population. Other resources can be used and addressed, and it should be kept open to the public. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Caller with the last four numbers 8854. Please hit *6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 8854. Please unmute yourself by selecting *6 and then let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on. Okay, I'm going to have to take you off the queue. Caller with the last four numbers 3650. Please select *6 to unmute yourself and then let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 3650. Please hit *6 to unmute yourself and then let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 3650. Please hit *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, I'm going to have to take you off the queue. Thank you very much. Caller with the last four numbers 1486. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on. Okay. 1486, last four numbers. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and then let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on. Okay, I'm going to have to take you off the queue. Thank you. Caller with the last four numbers 9775. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Jeffrey Mausner. I'd like to speak on number 13, the West Valley Shelter, and I have a community impact statement.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Jeffrey Mausner from the Tarzana Neighborhood Council and Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils. 5 neighborhood councils have filed community impact statements on this. They're in favor of the motion, which is that the Animal Services Department be instructed to report to the City Council on long-term plans for the West Valley Shelter. So to be clear, all of those neighborhood councils are very much against the Animal Services Department plan to demunicipalize the West Valley Shelter, against giving it away, even in a so-called hybrid form to a rescue organization. The Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils Bank, representing all 34 neighborhood councils in the San Fernando Valley, voted unanimously to oppose the LAS proposal and to, quote, demand that the West Valley Shelter remain open as a municipal shelter, close quote. I wrote an article in City Watch that details objections stakeholders have to the LAS draft proposal. I've attended meetings with shelter volunteers. I'm a volunteer at West Valley, with neighborhood councils, members of the public who use the shelter, and members of the public who do not necessarily use the shelter, but have paid for it. And there is very strong opposition about the LAS plan. We understand the dire financial condition the city is in and that there have to be budget cuts. But there are alternatives to turning the West Valley Shelter over to a rescue organization, including one, some additional funding from the city, two, raising funds from charitable organizations and individuals to supplement what cannot be provided from the general fund and other budget sources. Three, giving shelter volunteers additional responsibility so that the current and projected number of regular employees can operate all 6 shelters. And four, as was mentioned by Daniel, rather than having the entire budget cut fall on the West Valley Shelter and most municipal functions being shut down at that one shelter, all 6 city shelters should share in the burden. For example, a percentage of kennels, possibly 10 to 15% of kennels at all 6 shelters could be turned over to rescues rather than turning over 100% of the kennels at just one shelter. This has been referred to as a share the pain plan. This is all discussed in the City Watch article. The article also has a listing of the 14 major objections that citizens have to the LAS plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Caller with the last 4 numbers 7006. Would you please unmute your phone by pressing *6?
Pizza Pig. All items, motherfucker, and general comment.
You have 1 minute.
No, stupid. All the items and general public comment for Pizza Pig.
Then you have 2 minutes and 50 seconds.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, you fat son of a bitch, for Peppa Pig Correct. So we talk about our West Animal Shelter today. You and your corporate buddies are about to turn the animal prison to the biggest gift in Los Angeles City world history. Yes, what a shameful, disgusting bunch of pigs. Corporate pigs, non-profit pigs, outside council pigs, all kinds of pigs to house beautiful kitties, wow, to house beautiful dogs, woof, woof, and of course, everybody's favorite, the deadly pit bull.
Your time is up. Thank you very much, caller.
What? No, son of a bitch.
Caller with the last 4 numbers 4333. Would you please unmute yourself by pressing *6 and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, it's Whitney Smith. I already have spoken.
Thank you. Callers with the last 4 numbers 3650. Please unmute yourself by pressing *6 and give us your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Caller with the last 4 numbers 3650. Please select *6 to unmute yourself and let us know the name, your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Caller number 3650. please unmute yourself by pressing star 6. And let us know your name and the number you'd like to, the item you'd like to speak on. Okay, we're going to have to take you off the queue. Thank you. Caller with the last four number 6186, please press star 6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 6186, please press star 6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 6186, please press star 6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll have to take you off the queue. Caller with the last four numbers 1486, please press star 6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 1486, please press star 6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the number of items you'd like to speak on. Thank you very much. Caller with the last four numbers 9775, please press star 6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, it's Jeff Mausner. I already spoke. Thank you.
Okay. Caller with the last four numbers 5960, please press star 6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Yes, my name is Michelle Cornelius. I'd like to speak on items number 12 and 13.
Okay, you have 2 minutes, Michelle.
Thank you. First, I would like to oppose using donations from the Animal Welfare Trust Fund to pay the glue for marketing and a new website. It's specifically with a new website. While LA Animal Services does need a new website, a website is one of the main ways city departments provide services to the public, and as such, it should be funded using city revenue. I just don't think it's appropriate to use donations from a trust fund for this purpose. As for the fundraising component of the proposal, this could be justified because charities do use money to generate more funds. But the key metric here I'd be interested in is fundraising efficiency, which is defined by Charity Navigator as the amount spent to raise $1. So a charity which scores the highest score cannot spend more than 10 cents to raise $1. So my question would be, what is the expected fundraising efficiency, taking into account both the over $500,000 in a contract over 3 years, as well as LA Animal Services staff time associated with fundraising? Furthermore, what would these donated funds be used for? Is it food and medicine for the foster volunteers? Is it spay and neuter, education for the public, shelter maintenance, advertising, training for employees? And I would want to know the oversight mechanisms that we've put in place to better ensure transparency and accountability. Lastly, for the West Valley Animal Shelter, I just want to state that I oppose closing it as a municipal shelter. I would like to see it reopened as it was prior to its closing in April of this year. Just last night, I looked at the 2019-2020 budget, and under shelter operations and care, there was 167 positions there. There was also 167 positions funded in 2020-2021. So I don't know why the general manager is saying that she does not have the staff to operate it when there's been no change in the number of staff positions in the budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Speaker. Caller with the last four numbers 6281, please press star 6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Hi, my name is Gail Rath, and I'm a Los Angeles City, San Fernando Valley resident, and I want to speak on 12 and 13.
Okay, you
First
have
of all,
2
with
minutes.
the glue, can you hear me? I'm sorry?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. With the glue, they don't have a sufficient resume to handle a department or do any funding. Please take a look and see what their past resume looks like. And in this time of need, when we don't have even any funding to keep the shelters opening, and at the last commission meeting, they were discussing even to keep the time of the remaining shelters open because they don't have any funding. Why should we spend all this money on PR and a new website? Years ago, we did a committee report where LA Animal Services hired a group. They went down to all the local administrative areas, I forgot what they're called, and asked everybody what they needed for animal services to become a better organization. Money
Thank
was
you,
spent
ma'am.
on that.
Your time is up. Thank you for that.
What about
Caller with the last 4 numbers 6186. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. I think this is a repeat caller. Caller with the last 4 numbers 4411. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
Hello, my name is Carolyn. I have a general comment and also items 12 and 13. How much time do I have?
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I was calling regarding the closure of West Valley Animal Shelter. As you know, because we have been calling into meetings and writing letters to your office, San Fernando Valley comprises of over 40% of the city. However, we cannot function with a single animal shelter. With the closure of West Valley Animal Shelter, East Valley Shelter was already overburdened because the shelter was already given away by Ms. Barnett to friends, best friends. It simply cannot happen. And these are public funds that were spent to build this shelter with Prop F. Voters will come back and remember that they were promised one thing, and then the money taken was privatized and given to private entities. That's item 1. Item 2 that I'd like to discuss is the care of animals under Ms. Barnett's care. There was an animal that came in, unhealthy, 4 feet, 2-year-old dog. He left dragging his back foot because he was so severely injured under her care, and he is now amputated. The leg, he was rescued, and the leg had to get amputated. So when she is painting pictures of rainbows and butterflies and glitter, I hope there is an oversight by you looking at the side of the story that's not so cute with reindeers and puppies. Item 3, Ms. Barnett regularly during PA meetings and commissioner meetings has stated that when she was interviewed for this job for Los Angeles Animal Services, she told the city she does a great job fundraising. She is recorded as saying so, that she has great fundraising skills, and that's one of the reasons she was picked for this job. And now we're going to take money that people have donated to the care of animals and give them to yet another private entity to build a website to collect donations. On the one hand, she says, evictions are coming and people will be doing so poorly that they will have to surrender animals, yet she is giving away the kennel space that we will desperately need. And if people are getting evicted, they're not really going to be looking to donate. The donors will regularly donate anyway. The general public will be struggling cash-wise and not looking to donate. So $1.5 million spent on raising donations during a time that the public will be unemployed, getting evicted, and suffering is just not the right time to shut a shelter down because of low funds and then turn around and spend millions on fundraising and a website is ludicrous. And the public will be closely watching you and remembering this at the polling booth. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, also, one more thing. So many callers have called in and they're not able to speak. I'm pretty sure you're having a technical difficulty, which I hope you will brave and get back to those callers and get their
Thank you,
opinion.
ma'am. Thank you. Caller with the last four numbers 0551, please press *6 to unmute yourself and let us
Yes,
know
hello.
your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Yes.
Yes,
can you
hello,
hear?
this is Kathy Serkis. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi, Kathy Serkis. I'm a resident of CD12. I sent an email a few hours ago to Councilmember Koretz and Lee outlining some of the items I want to discuss, with particularly 12 and 13, about, you know, the agreement with Blue. Many of the callers, previous callers, have covered many of the things I wanted to cover with regards to using animal welfare trust money for website development and fundraising. And again, you know, I know Brenda has spoke about this on numerous occasions of her expertise in this field. So I say to myself, why do you need to hire? And if the glue will subcontract out fundraising. This is something she can do on her own. They talked about the animal welfare trust fund being depleted before the end of the fiscal year. I just want to know where $4 million is going to go to in the next few months. So that's something you need to look into, where all the donations going there. The other thing I want to talk about was the West Valley. I mean, we're all operating under the assumption that the budget cuts will not allow that shelter to be reopened. However, I'd like to get back to the basics. I have yet to see, nor have I anywhere online or whatever, seen a report or a spreadsheet or an analysis that shows, given the money they have, the head count they have, how it cannot be done. We keep operating under that premise, and that's not the case. If the West Valley shelter needs to be open immediately, it's collecting dust out there. And Brenda Barnett, that shelter is not hers to give away. It belongs to us, the community members, the citizens of the city of Los Angeles. So I beg you to get back to the basics, have her show you the numbers, how it cannot be open, and let's just not assume that. I've never seen the numbers that show why it can't be done. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And Councilman Koretz and Councilmember Lee, if you can look at my email, I have a little bit more detail in there about the fundraising and the glue. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Caller with the last four numbers 3715, please press *6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you wish to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 3715, please press *6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Okay, caller with the last four numbers 3715, please press *6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the item you'd like to speak on. Okay, I'm going to have to take you off the queue. The last person on the queue is somebody who's calling from a private number. Would you please unmute yourself, press *6, and hi.
Can you hear?
Let us know your last name and your name and items you'd like to speak on.
This is Heather Michaels, and I'm calling on behalf of the Encino Neighborhood Council, and I'm also chairing our animal wellness or welfare committee. So this would be on 12 and 13, and I wanted to send my regards to Councilmember Koretz and Councilmember Blumenfield and Councilmember Lee. Yes, this is of great concern to all of the community and all the neighborhood councils, and we did issue a community impact statement regarding West Valley Shelter. During the COVID times, we understand there's restrictions, but like the rest of the community, we're deeply concerned about the delays in opening. But I first want to address, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and we really are trying to seek solutions, not cause any chaos. So regarding the shelter, and the cutbacks, there's been a lot of financial cutbacks to Los Angeles Animal Services. So what can we do to remedy this? I've spoken to the mayor, Ron Galpern, and several others. Our neighborhood council wants to see how we can collaborate with the other neighborhood councils and offer solutions regarding how we can possibly open before next year. And I did have a conversation with Brenda Barnett. We had a Zoom meeting this morning. Again, I'm just trying to bridge that gap between the community and the stakeholders and the Los Angeles Animal Services on real solutions. Again, there's so much misinformation out there. So with the budget cuts, what can we do there? That's something that needs to be addressed. And also, can we fundraise? Can we maybe provide additional assistance for shelter representatives that are volunteers so that they can be working on the level of the staff since there's been so many cutbacks financially? There's a number of different things that we can provide in support and an arm. I'm also a nonprofit, so we've, extended various options that, can sort of assist and help to create a functioning shelter. So we really ask that for number 12 and 13, and that we can have another meeting to discuss these viable solutions, whether it's opening it in a very limited capacity, which really needs to be done, and that we can start steering forward towards what's happening in January. One more thing I just want to mention on the pantry. There's been donations, there's been estates that have been established for the shelter for the sake of the animals. I think we're all in the same place where we want to see what's best to protect the animals and to provide a safe haven. If we need to fundraise for you guys, let's work on that. Let's plan on that. Again, I would like to see if I can kind of follow up with Councilmember Koretz. I know I talk to you all the time, Bob Blumenfield and John Lee, and see how we can provide solutions that everybody can be happy with. We may not be able to make everybody entirely happy, but again, it's about the animals. So let's just work together to make an impact and move forward, please. So I really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to go back to some of the people who have not been able to get through. Caller with the last four numbers 6186. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and state your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 6186. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and state your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 6186. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and state your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Okay, I'm going to go to the next person who wasn't able to get through. Caller with the last four numbers 4411. Please press *6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Caller with the last four numbers 4411. Please state your, you're there. Please state your name.
I already spoke. It's Carolyn, but since you're calling on me again, I will remind you that West Valley Shelter is the only animal shelter with air conditioning for the dog kennel.
Thank you very much, ma'am. If you're calling in from a private number, please press *6 to unmute yourself and let us know your name and the items you'd like to speak on.
And if you've already spoken, please let us know that, because you don't have a second opportunity to speak if we call on you a second time in error.
If you're calling from a private number, please press *6 to unmute yourself, state your name and the items you'd like to speak on. Okay, Mr. Chair, I think that's it.
Thank you. Well, thank you to everyone, and we will now close
Goodbye.
the public hearing portion of our meeting. First, I'd like to ask that we take items 1, 8, and 9 on consent, if there are no objections. Do we need a roll call on this grouping?
Yes, that would be a good idea. Councilmember Koretz?
Mr. City Clerk,
Yes, that would be a good idea.
do we need a roll call? If so, I'd ask for one.
Yes, that would be good. I will start. Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Price?
Aye.
Very good.
Those items are adopted, and item 1 was adoption of a resolution. Item 8 was to approve the CAO's recommendations, and item 9 was to receive and file the report and direct the Department of Aging to submit these positions for review through the existing hiring freeze process. I'm going to suggest, since there are a number of folks waiting and listening for items 12 and item 13, that we begin with item 12.
Very good. Just one moment.
And so if we can
Yeah.
have a representative from the department.
Item number 12, continue from October 21st, 2020, CAO and Department of Animal Services reports relative to entering into an agreement with the GLUE LLC for marketing, fundraising, public relations, and website development and management for the Department of Animal Services.
Good afternoon, council members. Tammy Watson with the Department of Animal Services, along with Catherine Chico, our contracts manager, and Susie Rios, our CAO budget analyst, is with us also. We're asking that this committee approve the department's request to enter into an agreement with the GLUE to provide marketing, fundraising, public relations, and website development for the department. During the October 21st call meeting, there were questions and concerns that were raised that I'd like to address today. One of the concerns raised was that the GLUE is not a well-known company for fundraising. The GLUE's background and experience centers on designing, building, and marketing websites with the use of data-driven research designed to achieve results. The CEO of the GLUE has over 20 years of user experience and has been leading the design and development team at the GLUE for the past 8 years. I'd like to highlight that the GLUE is partnering with Goodways to fulfill the goals of the contract. And Goodways is a fundraising strategy firm that specializes in individual giving and digital media. Goodways help organizations to use their current strength and resources to raise awareness, capital, and supporters. The Goodways team has over 50 years of experience in fundraising and has worked with well-known campaigns such as Ciclavia, where their work generated a 78% increase in donation revenue in year 1 and 47% in year 2. They've also helped MLK Community Hospital increase their digital outreach, generating a 113% increase in donation revenue in year 1. Working with the Providence Hospitals, they tripled the donation revenue for the Giving Tuesday campaign. Additionally, the founder of Goodways has developed a curriculum for and instructed the digital fundraising coursework for UCLA. Through our RFP process, we had 3 independent proposal evaluators, and that was a marketing manager from the Bureau of Sanitation, a community programs manager from the Port of LA, and the VP of marketing from the LA Zoo. And they all reviewed the proposals and qualifications and found that the GLUE and its partners, Goodways, to be comprehensive, their proposal to be comprehensive, well organized with strong work plans, and geared toward the goals of the department. We were really excited to know that a woman-owned, disadvantaged, and small business enterprise had proven to be both the best qualified and the lowest bid. Another concern that was raised was the use of the Animal Welfare Trust Fund and its ability to supplement the general fund. We confirmed that the funds from the Animal Welfare Trust Fund cannot be used to supplement the general fund. And Councilmember Corretz, I want to mirror your comment and emphasize that the fundraising campaign will generate revenue increase for both the Animal Welfare Trust Fund and the Animal Sterilization Fund. And that is the fund that is projected to be depleted before the end of the fiscal year. But those donations that we'll raise through campaigns will also help to support the mandatory spay and neuter ordinance. And then lastly, there was a question regarding the contractor receiving compensation based on the percentage of donations received. And I will assure this committee that that is not a provision of the contract. The Code of Ethics for Fundraisers actually states that fundraisers shall not accept compensation that is based on a percentage of the contributions. And so I wanted to give this additional information for you. And with that, myself, Catherine, and Susie, we're all available to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, I'm still a little nervous about the fundraising, and do they do exclusively online campaigns, or do they do any of the relational work with donors? Because clearly one possible step towards success is to work with individuals that are highly motivated to support animal issues and animals in general. I would have thought that the first priority is to put together a good list of donors in the LA area and to actually work with them one-on-one to get the support.
That is part of their process and their research, and they have combined both the digital media outreach and the on-the-ground donors in their campaigns. But we met with them and we talked about their process, and one of their first steps is to include our current donors and reach out to other donors within the city of Los Angeles area.
And it was mentioned a few times, and it certainly is true that when Ms. Barnett was first hired at GM, one of the qualities that we looked for was her personal fundraising ability. Are you still able to do that work as part of this project and make some use of that on the relational fundraising side?
Can I jump in here for just a minute, Tammy? Sorry. This is Brenda Barnett, GM of Animal Services. Yeah, we've been raising about $800,000, I think, a year for the Animal Welfare Trust Fund. And you're absolutely right about relational opportunities. Usually what happens, the fundraising team will identify the donors, and they'll do that either through talking with staff or through working with our own database. And then they will use key members of the staff to make calls on those donors. Typically, a fundraising team will not go out and just do cold calls on fundraisers they do not know. They would take someone, myself, Tammy, someone on the team who can speak really about the department in depth as part of the fundraising process.
Okay. How about GLU's background in terms of public relations and humane affairs? What is their background in that arena?
I'm going to toss it back to you, Tammy. I just wanted to talk about the fundraising piece.
Thank you.
So their background in public relations, when we met with them and also in their proposal, they did extensive work with several agencies. For example, the city of Pasadena, and then our own Department of Transportation and LA Metro. And what they did is they do a heavily research and design portion. That's what their model is. And so they have community engagement. They actually hold meetings with the community to find out what services that they're interested in from the department. And then they help us to provide that. And they use that method in building the website so that we're able to provide all of the interactive services that the community need and to help us to have a very thorough, interactive public relations in our website and in our educational programs.
So what's their background on humane issues? Have they worked with animals or an animal services department previously?
I don't have knowledge of them working with an animal welfare agency.
Do you think that's a drawback?
Okay, let me jump back in. No, it's not a drawback at all. Actually, fundraising for animals is one of the easier ways to raise money, because a lot of people will give to animals because they can't food for themselves. And when I used to do fundraising professionally, I loved fundraising for the animals because I thought that was successful. But it's about your reach. How many people can we reach out to? How many people can we talk with? And how many people can we convert to donors? Not only to annual donors, but how many people are going to leave a lasting gift to the animals or to the department in their will? So those are all things that are critical. But if they have been successful raising money for something like Kidney Foundation or one of those foundations that's really hard to raise money for, they will have no problem at all of raising money for the animals. And I a fairly extensive amount of time talking with the person who's in charge of the fundraising. And I believe that she is intuitive. I believe that she's perceptive. And I think that she can do a good job for us working with myself and our marketing team in-house.
And on the web services, will they be focused more on adoptions, or will they be focused on the department's educational programs? Where do you think they bring the most value?
Well, I think if I was listening when Tammy was presenting, she was talking about doing some surveys and some community interviews to see what the community wanted. And sometimes if you get too much into shop talk, they may not understand us as well as they'll understand someone who's not on the team explaining what we're doing. That they'll be able to break down our shop talk, the normal dialogue that people will understand.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add, they demonstrated experience with a multi-tiered audience. So we will have that, LA Animal Services, we will have our adopters, we'll have the educational community, we'll also have volunteers. And so they have experience when they worked with the Ames Cancer Hospital. They demonstrated they have that experience. And then also when they were working with Metro, which was a very large, high-profile website, they were able to meet the needs of all of the users.
Okay, and folks have mentioned concerns, which will come up with another item, about the West Valley shelter and being able to fund it. Would it be more appropriate to use this money from the Animal Welfare Trust Fund for that purpose? Or are we even allowed to do such a thing?
We're not allowed to use funds from the Animal Welfare Trust Fund to supplement the general fund, and or to pay salaries. So we wouldn't be able to use these monies for that. These funds for that.
Okay, and do you have a good breakdown of how the $1.5 million will be spent on this project? How much of it is going to be spent on a new website? How much of it on fundraising efforts, etc.?
Well, I have approximate numbers. I don't have the actual contract in front of me. but based on my review, 50% of it it will be spent on the website, about 40% on fundraising, and then the 11% would be on the public relations and branding. And I just want to note that the 1.5, that includes the contingency. So the actual number for the figure for the contract is 1.3, but in the first, it's spread across 2 years.
Let's go. I don't know, all of a sudden it just cut out. Oops, I just cut myself out of the meeting. Oh shit, I hate this crap. Huh.
I think Mr. Koretz's computer has frozen.
I don't know if you can hear me. I
can hear you
missed
now.
everything that would have been said right after asking that question. Hate to do that to you.
No problem. I had mentioned that I don't have the contract in front of me to give you the exact numbers, but I do know that about 49% of the budget is for the web development. 40% would be for fundraising, and the remaining 11% is for public relations and branding. And I was mentioning that the contract amount, excluding the contingency, is 1.3 million, and it's spread over 3 years.
Okay, so on average, $500,000 a year. It's not 1.5 million just for this coming year. Okay. Other questions from other members? Mr. Lee.
Ms. Watson, do you know if they have any projections on what they, as part of the proposal? I couldn't find it anywhere in the proposal. Maybe past performances or what we think that this 11%. I guess I don't know how that's broken out, but what we might receive.
We did discuss that when we met with them, and I know that based on their ethics, they don't give guarantees or percentages. But when we met, they felt that they can double what we currently bring in within the first year or the first 2 years of the contract.
And how much do we normally bring in on an average year?
On average, it's about 800,000 annually.
So 800,000. Have we received less this year? I mean, with COVID, are we down?
I will need to ask Catherine, our budget director, if she can answer that question.
Hi, Catherine Chico, Department of Animal Services. And last year, our spay and neuter donations were down. Our Animal Welfare Trust Fund donations were pretty much the same as the year before when taking into account donations only, but the spay and neuter donations were down last year.
Okay, so we normally raise about 800,000 a year, and they're going to double that. So we're spending $500,000 to then increase our budget, our Animal Welfare Trust Fund, even though there's no guarantees, by another 800,000. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is the hope, that we can increase it. We can double what we're currently doing. Okay,
so it just seems to me that we're spending $500,000 a year in order to net gain of $300,000 with this contract. What are there any markers? Maybe like year 1, year 2. If they don't receive this, is this like a set 3-year contract, or do we have the option on a yearly basis to take a look at maybe their efforts, and if they're not, we're spending $500,000 to double our amount, which seems, not necessarily a great investment, but are there any, do you know if we have any metrics, Swanson, like about where we could cancel the contract after a year or 6 months or?
Well, our contracts have language in it that if they're not performing to the standards, that we can cancel the contract. Now, according to the contract, it goes across 3 years. And so there are various campaigns throughout each of the years. So we'd have to see the results of each campaign as we move through the contract.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Councilman Price, it just seems like an awful big gamble when we're already unsure about what's coming into the Animal Welfare Trust Fund, to use this on a gamble to hopefully bring more when we use these funds every year to address certain issues. It seems like we have a steady donation base of donors that provide this money. I mean, I at this time, I don't necessarily feel comfortable with us moving forward with this contract.
But I'm not necessarily totally comfortable either, but you do have to realize a couple things. One is we're getting other services. So it's not just being expended for fundraising purposes. But even if we were only able to raise a couple $100,000 above what we normally would in terms of what we bring in new and what we spend on the contract, when you bring in new donors, hopefully a reasonably high percentage of them become part of your annual donor base as well. So it certainly builds on itself.
Absolutely. In a normal budget year, I would say absolutely. In a year like this, where every single penny is, we need to be careful on how we spend it. The services that the additional web services or the different campaign, this money is obviously used every year for spay and neutering programs and so many important programs in the city. It just seems like, we would be using a good portion of what we have in order to continue these programs that I know are important to the city. So that's just, my opinion, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Price, I think you were trying to get our attention as well.
I would thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate the report, Brenda. Thank you, and also Tammy and Catherine. I support the program. We certainly use it in our district. Spay and neutering is a big deal, especially with the large number of animals sometimes that are not protected. But I'm curious. I may have missed this. Is there a fee or a percentage that the organization is going to receive for the fundraising efforts? I know they're doing more than fundraising, but what kind of fees are involved for the efforts to be undertaken?
There are no additional fees for fundraising or the amount of there's no additional compensation for any funds generated. The only compensation is what is outlined in the contract for the fundraising efforts.
And that is?
It's about
1.5?
No, the 1.5 is the entire contract, but it has different components. It has marketing, fundraising, and website development, public relations, and branding. The component of fundraising is just one of the 5 components, and that is about $500,000 years.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and I would just say, I have a little bit of a different approach to budget shortfalls, and I certainly did during the first disastrous recession that I started in. I tend to try to spend more money rather than less on things that will actually generate more money. So, as an example, when we were, I should say, when I was in the legislature and we had a very significant shortfall around the year 2000. At first, it was proposed that the Board of Equalization cut auditors to save money. And then they looked at it and found that auditors actually were a multiplier of their own salary, and they wound up hiring more auditors rather than cutting the number. And I am somewhat confident, unless these folks wind up not being as competent as our interview panel was convinced they would be, that they will bring more value both on the IT side and on the branding side and fundraising side, that I actually believe this will be money well spent. If it turned out it wasn't because they weren't competent, I would probably suggest that we look for an alternative company at that point. But if this works, I think it'll be money well spent and money we'll be glad to have undertaken. So if there are no further comments or questions, I'd ask for a roll call on this item.
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
No.
Councilmember Price?
Aye.
The ayes have it. It's approved.
Okay, that item passes. Item 13.
Item 13, motion Lee Blumenfield relative to the long-term plan for the West Valley Animal Shelter.
I'm going to, if it's okay, I'm going to leave my camera off because my camera was weak and I think we might have better sound quality.
Fair enough.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We hear you
So
fine.
what we've been doing, we are.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Barnett, I apologize. Mr. Chair, I do have to just make one quick change in the motion, and I think it's appropriate that I do it before we start discussion on the item, if that's okay. Sure. It's just a technical amendment.
Okay.
We're just deleting the third paragraph in my motion and replacing it with, in 2019, the West Valley Shelter impounded a total of 9,320 animals, while the East Valley Shelter impounded 14,605. With both Valley Shelters covering a geographic expanse that constitutes 40% of the total area of Los Angeles, and with an estimated 1.77 million population, it is imperative that the city move forward on a long-term plan for the West Valley Animal Shelter. So it's just in the preamble, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to change some wording that we had in the original motion, if that's okay. I believe the clerk has a copy of the motion.
We do.
If it technically needs a second, I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize, Ms. Barnett.
Ms. Barnett, go ahead.
No problem. So when we initially closed West Valley and North Central, it was due to COVID. We had been operating in North Central in temporary quarters, sort of like trailers, for a couple of years while North Central was under construction to Prop F work. We're still finishing that Prop F work. I believe that sometime later this month, the building will be turned over to us, and then there is some work that we need to do that building to get it ready to open. We had some repair work done at West Valley while we weren't in there. The reason that we had to close the two shelters, one was the first month of COVID, when we asked the community for help, well over 2,000, I think it was 2,202 animals were taken from our shelters, either as adopted by our rescue partners. And we had a population reduction in all 6 shelters to close 2 shelters. Do staff is doing now, we are still not having to euthanize any animals for space. The animals who are being euthanized now are either serious medical cases that we cannot resolve mainly, or they're dangerous dogs that we don't feel confident to release to the public. So at this point, we're not having to euthanize any animals. Now, we do not expect that to go on, especially when, and we're predicting now that those in January. So I have from both shelters, both North and West Valley, end of the year to be ready for those evictions. I'll explain to you what our challenges are and why we haven't been saying anything for a while. And we have been working on it. One of the things that we've done in 2000 building plan when the Prop F funding was first approved. So we were looking, and that was the plan that showed all the shelters that were going to be built, what size they were going to be built. It had climate studies. It had all kinds of studies in it. We are trying to replicate that study now, 20 years later, for 2020 to help guide us. One of the things that I want to be guided by is where are the services most needed. A few years ago, those of you who were here probably remember that we did a survey of zip codes, and we looked at what zip codes in the city had the lowest incomes, the poor, and the least transportation. And we used those zip codes, and we mobile spay neuter vans into those zip codes, and we did free spay neuter, and we didn't ask any questions except, please bring us a piece of mail that has your name and your zip code and shows that you use the zip code. And we did that to try to help where the need was most studying now. And the possibility that we could look at the Service Valley is not the best shelter for a hybrid model. With you, in my heart, I don't believe that. I believe West Valley probably is, but I'm not going to go out and say it is until I have all the facts about all the shelters. So I just want to explain that. The other thing that I think is important to know is the staffing reductions. It looks to me like now we are going to lose about 90 more people. So we did our first budget, we did a presentation to the community, and it was under 4 with our reduction. And I can't, I'm sure Catherine can if you want to know it. It was $3 million. And then out of that, our spay neuter budget was cut from about $1 million or 1.1 to 500,000. That's why we're concerned about running out of money for spay neuter, and that's why I'm grateful that you are allowing us to hire the glue, because raising money for spay neuter is challenging, but it's something that's going to be critical for a city that has a mandatory spay neuter policy. So after we did our first round of budgets, we were asked to do another budget exercise for another 3% reduction, and that comes out to almost 700,000. So when I look at all of this, I'm saying that we're going to lose approximately 45 positions from that additional 3%. I'm looking at 22 people from our department who are going to take the SIP and take the retirement benefit program. And I'm looking at 23 vacancies that we're not going to be able to fill because there's a hiring freeze. So that takes our department down about 90 people, and we have about 370 people that operate 7 locations, the 7th location being the admin offices. So we have been working on everything we can of services that are not surfaces where we can do things, we can do things by phone, things to reduce for people we need doing things. So we've been working on quite an exercise, and that's where that's where this 3% was a relatively new assignment. So we're challenged with people, and it's challenging with staff. And one of the things that the city has asked us to do is to reduce dog bites. So, you know, we want to bring our volunteers back as soon as we can. And but I want to tell you that there have been a number of substantial lawsuits against the city where we have allowed volunteers to either show dogs, have allowed volunteers to handle dogs, and either the dog. I'm not really saying it's their fault, but I am telling the people who work as ACTs, work as ACOs, the people that work on. They are professional animal handlers. And have we ever had staff bitten? Yes, we have. Ever had the kind of serious bites in other situations. So I think it's for us to make sure that when we're saying that we have the adequate staffing, and that's really all we're trying to do. We're not, there's no game. It's total poppycock that we're trying to sell a shelter. We're not. This is not a repeat of Best Friend happened, which also happened under my watch when I got here. The budget to operate 6 shelters, but we had 7. They've never been open to the public, so it's a situation. We have talked with the bond. The bond council is very clear that the bond money was to build shelters, and it needs to be used as a shelter. Nobody is trying to change that. The things that I know that the community has asked for, that I have said, I don't see why we couldn't do that. One is wanted officers stationed at the West Valley shelter. That's kind of a no-brainer for me. I will tell you, you may have one officer stationed at the West Valley shelter. The others may be out in the field where they might be closest to the proximity of a call. That's why you're still getting the same field service at West Valley that you were getting before. The other thing that the community was concerned about was that the barn area in the back, that's the only barn area that we have. And they're right. We need that. As silly as it may sound, if you're not a semi-farmer, horses get out and get lost just like dogs do. Cows get out and get lost. And sometimes our officers have to pick them up, and they need a safe place to take them. So having that West Valley shelter available for those animals is absolutely necessary and needed. And it's the only shelter in our 6 that has that kind of a facility. Now, it's not, people talk about it during fires and all that kind of stuff. 3 horse stalls is not what we do during fires. When we have a fire, we might have 100 horses at Hanson Dam. We might have more horses at the equestrian center. We have other outside ways that we handle fires and floods and those emergencies. But it doesn't mean that we don't need those barns behind West Valley. We absolutely do, and nobody argues with that. The other thing that I heard the community say quite often, and this would be, the only difference here would be there's only one set of barns. There's only three little barns behind West Valley. We don't have that anywhere else. But everyone with public safety services, and the third thing I heard them say a number of times was, it's an emergency. We want to be able to drop off an animal at our closest shelter. And I believe that we can accommodate that. Now, many of you know, or some of you know, over Facebook, that we put out a survey. I actually haven't read the results on that survey yet. Put out a survey to the New Hope partners. Any one of them would be interested in a proposal to do something and I think the survey probably did say West Valley, but I'm not positive because I didn't read it. Now, in that survey, we also said things that could have been discouraging, such as, we want to be clear that you will have to carry, you will be required by the city risk managers to carry the kind of insurance that would name the city as other to guarantee the city that that they would be not held accountable for any mistakes that an outside partner would do. We also told them that they would probably have to deal with personnel matters for any hired person, that we would not be able to give them permission to operate in the city, that their salaries, living wage, that they would have to provide full-time staff, that they would have to provide medical insurance, and that these things would probably be equivalent to what the city, because I didn't want to mislead anyone into that they would be able just to come in and do whatever they want, all be free, and they wouldn't have to have insurance and pay people much. You know, I wanted to make sure that we're honest on that. I still have to survey. I have to look and see if there were any responses from people who were interested. That I honestly don't know. So, I mean, that's where we are. I really, there's some things that have to be done. I've talked with Mr. Steve Houchin, this department, and we've talked briefly a little bit about that the kind of agreement, the kind of contract we would have to have that would protect the city with these people. And you know, I've told him that, you know, we could be on a fast track if we can get this plan out so that we can start to, you know, look at how we can reopen both of these shelters, and which shelter, if it's one other than West Valley, might be recommended for a hybrid model. So, you know, as things have changed for us quite rapidly, you know, every time there's a change, we have to make a change, and we have to think. Someone asked me today, just opening up a little bit, and I said, West Valley, no, because we were thinking to change our working schedules and that we might have a little bit more flexibility. But then when the cases didn't look like the COVID cases, like they were going where we wanted them to go, we were asked to stay the course for where we are. We've already put out notice and would like to change our schedule back at the end of this cycle, and that's, we're hoping to get that. I think, you know, departments, we work with emergency management, we certainly work with the CAO's office, we work with the mayor's office, and of course different council offices. I think people sometimes more credit and authority than I deserve or than I have, but we want the shelters open, we want the services, all shelters, and we want it as quickly as we can. We're working just as hard as we can in light of all the changes that come and go. So with that, I think I'll stop rambling and try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett, and I have many of them, but I think appropriately, I'm going to ask Councilmember Lee to lead this off since it's in his vicinity, and I know he has many questions about the necessity of taking this step.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate you allowing me to go first and ask some of the questions. Ms. Barnett, you mentioned that this location was chosen during this time because of we were doing construction at West Valley. Is that what I heard? Is that correct?
No, that's not why it was chosen. But there was some construction done at West Valley, some improvements in the vet clinic. I think it was flooring, although I might have to ask somebody to be sure on that. But we had some repair work that we were doing. But that wasn't why it was chosen. It just made sense to us because of the location and the need, and it just happened to be the one. It's not a real large shelter, and it seemed like it would make sense to us because we still had East Valley and Chesterfield Square, which are our larger shelters, open.
Right, but what was the need to close this one down? I didn't catch that. Like, why do we need to?
We didn't need the space. We didn't need the space. We had 2,232 animals were pulled from our shelters when we asked the community for help. So we had a lot of space in 6 shelters. So we just tried to consolidate for efficiency, and also so we could put our staff on our shifts so that we could avoid COVID exposure.
Okay, and you said that. I apologize, and if I'm going to repeat anything that you made a statement, your connection was a little spotty in places that you came in and out. Did you say that you do not have plans for West Valley to continue to be closed, or that to reopen?
I'm trying to. Yeah, I really believe that we need to reopen both North and West Valley before the end of the year, because I think in January is when I'm expecting evictions to hit and our shelter population to go up.
Okay, so that's great news. So you foresee that West Valley would actually be up and operating sometime in January?
Well, sometimes the staff tells me I'm optimistic, but I would like to open them by the end of the year or the very first of the year for sure.
Oh, that's great news. So I look forward to working with you on that. So what? Okay, so are you coming back to us? I guess now that this motion has been submitted, will you come back to us at a future meeting with some sort of plan to reopen it?
We will, but what we will do is we will come up with a plan, and all plans are drafts until somebody says do it. So
sure.
we will come back with a draft plan of what our thinking is, and we will have some additional meetings to share with the community and let them so they can think about it and give their input. So that definitely is part of the plan. Then it's going to have to come back. I don't know what the approval process will be, whether the mayor's office will say take it through the commission and the policy committee and city council, or whether they'll just say that looks good, it fits the budget, and do it. I honestly have not asked them what the steps will be at that point.
But the plan is to reopen it as a city shelter, correct?
Well, I don't know. Definitely to have animal control officers, to have 24-hour emergency drop-off, to have the barns. Whether or not that we're not going to have enough animal care technicians to operate all 6 shelters. So how we do that is what we're trying to figure out right now. And we're also trying to figure out whether if there is a hybrid shelter, whether West Valley is to be a hybrid. And what I'm trying to look at are the needs in each community. So if there's a community that has no money, no housing, and no transportation, they for sure need services. So that's what I'm trying to do. But every shelter needs options. Every shelter needs, public safety through the animal control officers. You have, and I don't know if you know this or not, but you still have a clinic that's being operated by Heaven on Earth. And I believe they've already started doing some low-cost vaccine clinics for community members. I don't know how they're publicizing, but I've had several conversations with them. So they're anxious to get started up again. And I think they're already doing the vaccine clinics.
Okay, so you say it's a personnel matter because you said earlier, you said you're losing 22 people to SIP.
Yes, we're losing. Our last 3% reduction exercise was takes 45 positions. The SIP is 22, and then we have 23 vacancies that we don't believe we're going to be allowed to fill.
Right. I mean, those are positions that have been, for lack of a better term, unfilled for in last year's budget and the previous year's budget that you kept on. Correct. I mean, those aren't. We're talking. Some of those positions you're talking about haven't been filled in years. Correct.
Catherine, do you want to talk about that, or Tammy, because that's not my area of expertise.
I wouldn't say that they've been vacant for years. We do have quite a turnover in animal care technicians, so there's a moving vacancy of those positions. So, and the animal control officer positions that were vacant, we did have those vacant for years, but those were cut in next year's budget, so they are not included in the vacancies we're speaking of now.
Okay, so so those positions have cut, but the same number pre-COVID is pretty much what we're operating with today, correct? I mean, we haven't had any major budget, I guess, layoffs or slashes that I know of, right? We're still at the same amount of officers. I know that we have 7 on, new ones coming on. I didn't know you had 22 people in SIP because the report I read had, I think, 2 admin and 1 animal control officer that was taking advantage of that SIP program. So we still have the same amount of people in the field, correct?
The number of officers in the field, we have 7 officers that are in training. We have 6 vacancies, and then there were 10 vacancies that were cut from our budget. As far as animal control officers, we have 16 fewer than we did in last year's budget.
I see, but that's not due to COVID, right? That was just...
No, that is not due to COVID. Now, I don't have what I don't have with me are the number of employees who may be off work due to illness or leave of absences. I don't have that information in front of me, but those are filled positions.
So, but regardless of how this shelter reopens, they'll be able to accept animals at the West Valley, because I know that some of the
yes.
rescue places don't accept animals. Okay.
Now that's one of the things that the community asked for. The community asked for emergency intake 24/7, and they asked for use of the barn area in the back, and they asked for animal control officers. Those have we've always said that sounds like something you have to have, and we've agreed with. We haven't. Most of the debate is over how we do the adoption section.
Right. So I mean, we're currently all of the West Valley officers. They're just at other current shelters, right? We haven't laid them off or done anything like that, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And some of them may be. I don't know how many I don't remember how many of them are in the SIP. I know we've lost at least a couple. There's more than that.
Yeah. I think. Well, from the report I read, I believe we lost 1 out in the field. But so Measure F, this was approved, by the voters to improve different city facilities, and this, animal shelters was one of the ones that are included. I mean, this is one of the nicest shelters that we have. Does anything preclude us, in those bonds from basically, this is a city facility. We're giving away, a public, building that the voters entrusted us with. Is there anything in the bond language that would prevent us from this?
I didn't hear anything when I met with the bond counsel, with representatives, with an attorney from the bond counsel. She seemed to think that as long as we do the shelter functions that it was built for, that that was what we had to do. We couldn't turn it into a some other kind of a nonprofit or some other kind of business or something like that.
I see. Okay. And can you explain one thing? You said that, this place will still be open for emergency intake. Is there a difference between emergency intake and owner surrender?
Well, emergency owner surrender is done by appointment. So owner surrenders probably would be directed to a shelter that had daily appointments. But emergency could be an owner surrender if there was suddenly an emergency and the person had their animal. But most emergencies would be thought as a sick or injured animal.
Okay, so both emergency surrender or owner surrender, emergency intake would be allowed at. We're working towards it being allowed at West Valley in January, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Barnett. Mr. Chair, if you allow me to, I have a, it's obviously up to your discretion whether you want to allow the member, Mr. Price or yourself, to ask questions. But I invited one of the East Valley officers just to give sort of a outlook on day to day, from the boots on the ground experience, from what's going on in East Valley now that we've closed West Valley. So if you allow me to do that, or I will take your lead on that if you'd like to ask questions of Ms. Barnett first, or if you allow me to question one of the officers.
I have a couple of questions. Mr. Price may have also, but without objection, I'll let your person give his testimony first.
Okay. Ms. Hatley, are you there? Barbara Hatley?
Hi, good morning, or good afternoon. Yes, I am.
So, Barbara, can you just tell us what your position is in animal services, and sort of give us a day by day? I know you work out of the East Valley. If you can just kind of explain what's going on there and how closing West Valley has affected the East Valley and the services that we've been providing.
Well, I want to thank you guys for giving me an opportunity to speak. I am an animal control officer, and I am a veteran of animal services for 30 years. The closure of West Valley, there's a lot of misinformation that you're being given, and I think mainly that has to deal with the fact that she said that there was they closed it because of space, that they didn't need the space. The problem is during COVID-19, we're only directed to do certain calls. We're not enforcing every call. We're not going out there and picking up every animal. So because we're not doing that, those shelters are not getting filled up like they can be if officers were given the opportunity to do our job. We're only being given an opportunity during this COVID-19 crisis to only handle certain numbers of calls. And because of that, you're going to see a limited intake. The other thing is, if owner surrender animals are only by appointment only, a lot of times what will happen is nobody wants to wait for that appointment. That results in people dumping animals on the street. If somebody doesn't want to wait for an appointment, guess where that animal is going to go? And as far as the what she said about, of course, animals, injured animals and things like that can come to the shelter. we're still doing responses from East Valley. So if somebody were to ring the bell and the security guard at West Valley answer that bell and they have an injured animal, it's still going to take an officer to come from East Valley over to West Valley to pick up that animal because there's no medical services there and take it to the appropriate place to get service. That response time can be up to an hour. We have the people there to staff the West Valley shelter. We have not lost anybody yet to the SIP program. And the number that she cited at first, I think she said 90 before her cutout. We are not losing 90 people. You cannot lose people you don't had on staff prior to COVID. We still have the same number of people. We may not have management people, but we still have the officers and the care technicians to do the job.
So, Ms. Hatley, can you explain a little bit about what the scheduling is and where the West Valley animal officers are now being, now that they're over at East Valley, it's changed sort of the schedules around, and can you explain to the committee a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, the scheduling that we have now is that we have two 12-hour shifts. So the first 12-hour shift starts from 7 in the morning to 7 p.m. at night. And then the second 12-hour shift is from 7 p.m. at night to 7 a.m. in the morning. That is an excruciating long shift for us. And, we were told that we would be doing this during COVID. There was several internal things that went out that said how many people liked the shift. I was told that people like it, but we've never seen the results. Everything that I hear, people hate this. We do not have a life. If you're spending 12 hours of a 24-hour period just doing your job, that's half your day, and the other half is the night.
But that gets cycled in, right? I mean, there are times when we have some of the officers just
off. Oh. Yes, we are paid to be at home, and the reason we were told to do that is because if someone were to test positive, the whole crew that was on the person who tested positive was supposed to go home, and the shift that was getting paid were basically getting paid as on call to come in and fill in that shift because of the exposure.
What about public safety concerns in closing West Valley?
The public safety concerns I have is that if we were talking about this being an LAPD station, nobody would talk about an LAPD station being closed and everybody responding out of North Hollywood. There's a public safety issue in the fact that you cannot just staff one officer or one person at West Valley and say the rest are going to be in the field. We need a place for which we can do enforcement. So when I do enforcement, that includes impounding animals, a lot of times due to cruelty. That could be impounding one or as many as 50, 60, 70 animals. If I do not have the place to take that because my shelter is closed, or it's a hybrid shelter and that space is being leased out to New Hope Partners or to whoever as a hybrid shelter, that means that I can't do that. It means that those animals stay in the location and they are being kept in inhumane situations.
Gotcha.
I have to have the ability to have that space. We need space to work, and the West Valley Center is that place to work.
And so the majority of I'm looking at the cost to run the West Valley budget. So the majority of the cost, almost 95% of it, is from salaries. So all of those salaries are still being utilized, but just in different shifts at East Valley.
Yeah,
at different shelters.
So
we haven't lost anybody. West Valley could be up and operating with those.
It could be open tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. If you don't mind staying on in case any of the other committee members have any questions, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you allowing me to get a perspective from the field.
Thank you. Mr. Price, do you have questions?
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
I have a couple. Obviously, I recognize we're in a COVID and a financial crisis. I know what was originally proposed was to have this shelter turned over to rescues and have them operate their own projects. projects out of it so that it wouldn't be a wasted building. It would provide resources, but wouldn't be a draw on staff. So sounds like we're looking at something different. The question is, how different? And when we talk about a hybrid, are we talking about just some of the services that we've discussed remaining, or are we talking about having half the shelter available to for local animals and for adoptions as a hybrid, or just a hybrid where we have a few of these services, but if you want to drop off your dog, or if you want to get an animal, an emergency response right away, you would really have to go to the other shelter.
So, you were breaking up a little bit. So let me try and see if I can answer it, and if not, then please ask me something else. The idea was to have everything normal at West Valley, except having the adoption center handled by a nonprofit. And one of the things that I had in mind for that is that it wouldn't reduce our capacity for animals, because I would want to ask the nonprofit to only have animals in there that came from one of the other LA City shelters, so that it helps us as we continue our no-kill goals. So it's not, bringing animals from anywhere. And like I said, I have not looked at ways to find out if there are New Hope partners who are interested. If anybody on the team who's on this has, but important thing for them was to let them know they would have to have an agreement, insurance, and provide benefits, and have a living wage for any staff.
I don't know if you could hear me, but you are frozen on my computer.
Did you hear any of it?
Not a bit. Now I hear you. I hear you as well. I missed that last part.
Yeah. Okay, so the services would be the same services: animal control officers, the barn area for holding large animals that needed either for cruelty cases or they got lost and got out, and then the original draft plan was to have a nonprofit operate the adoption section, but they would have to get their animals from one of the other LA City shelters.
What about the animals that are actually coming into West Valley now? If those were brought in, like somebody finds a dog running around and brings it in, would it have to go somewhere else first, or could it be adopted out by held, and once the owner is not found, adopted out by the nonprofit?
Well, that's certainly we haven't gotten down to the level of detail, but I don't see any reason that it couldn't be adopted in West Valley. It may it would go to one of the other shelters in the spayed and neutered and vaccinated, and then there's no reason that if the partner or the nonprofit who wanted it back, that they could have it back. We've never had any that said our New Hope partners, if it wasn't, had to take a specific animal.
Okay, and I think we're both having some transmission difficulties, but if you can hear my question, there have been a number of suggestions from folks in the community that I've talked with and heard here, all of which could allow the cuts, rather than be focused in this location, to be distributed throughout the shelter system. Dividing the staffing shortfall, adding volunteer functions that make sense, possibly cutting hours at all of the shelters, allowing nonprofits to provide some services with a certain amount of space at all shelters, raising extra funds for them, specifically to keep the West Valley shelter open, presumably from folks in the community that are served, and providing kennel space for nonprofits at all shelters rather than just at this one. What's the possibility of distributing these changes, and is there an economy of scale in eliminating one, or is it possible to actually do this and spread it out throughout the system, which would certainly be more desirable and less likely to cause disruption at this one West Valley shelter?
I think that would be causing disruption for the entire city, and I imagine that our labor partners would have something to say about that, because you can't bring volunteers in to do jobs that are done by city workers. I think that would be a management nightmare, in my opinion. That's why I look at all the shelters and make sure West Valley is, we think, it would be the most for that. The idea of dividing it, spreading it around the city, I think would be impossible to manage. A lot of issues. It would require a lot in the building than if we just did.
I think I lost her again.
No, I can hear you. Not hear the end of it. I said I think that trying to move people around the city and have different nonprofits in the different shelters would be a management nightmare, and I could foresee it creating some conflicts with our labor partners.
Do any of those suggestions have ability to work to try to raise money in the local area and see if that might be of help, or to well, I guess that would probably be the most viable one. Although certainly volunteers do provide some functions at times that otherwise staff would do. I know volunteers sometimes show the animals, for instance. If there could be more of those kinds of opportunities taken, it certainly could make things a little more viable.
Well, like I said earlier, I don't want to really get down on the volunteers, but I feel like our animal control officers, our animal care technicians, our shelter veterinarians and RVTs, over time, that they have fewer dog bites, less serious dog bites than some experience with our volunteers. So we have to do some more training with volunteers, which I'm doing, but I think that would work. I wouldn't be telling you the truth. Oh, sure, we can do that.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Lee, where would you recommend that we take this?
Oh, nothing. I mean, it's would love for Ms. Barnett just to report back with a plan on what we're doing. I just want to make just special attention to the fact that we're trying to give a nonprofit the adoption part of it, where that's actually where we make the revenue, and so that would, that would be the last place, because we lose revenue. And as I understand it, our partnerships with nonprofits, they basically get to pick what animals that they choose to adopt. I mean, we lose that revenue as a city. That would be the last thing that I would want to, be given to a nonprofit because that's the one area, and also, that allows us to get licensing, make sure that licensing is done. I know we've had problems with some of the nonprofits in the past with licensing issues. So if you can, Ms. Barnett, just make sure that we address all those issues. And for you, Councilman Kretz, when you talk about like staffing, so far no one's been cut. I mean, we have the same amount of animal control officers as we did pre-COVID. We could reopen West Valley tomorrow. It's just that they've been reassigned to other areas, so it's not that.
If the animal control officers would be willing to take care of the animals for the ACTs, but that doesn't happen. So it's, I understand where you're going, but I don't think you really understand the department. The animal control officers pick up animals to bring them in, but they don't take care of them, clean them, and feed them, and take them back and forth to the vet clinic, spayed and neutered. So I think it's a bit of a confusion here of what really different duties are. That's my concern, is that we really get all the facts out so people understand what we're talking about, and probably talking to some of the people who have responsibilities for figuring out what staff is going to operate what shelter for what shift.
Well,
it's not a simple question.
Right. So in your report back, if you can address that issue of, how many people, you're absolutely right. I don't know all the different positions that make up a shelter. Only, their names on a piece of paper that I have in front of me. But if you can explain if there were loss of positions and how, that has, played into consideration of not reopening West Valley as a full operating shelter, that'd be great if you could just include that as well in the report.
And I'd like to ask,
maybe I can understand a little bit better.
Will do.
And I'd like to ask, in addition, if you could give us a better understanding of shortfalls that are either present or we're anticipating, and how we expect that to impact in the future. If we actually have 22 people that wind up taking SIP, if you wind up with a 3% budget reduction, if we wind up with furloughs in the second half of the year, which I would almost guarantee, and how you have been impacted and will be impacted by COVID staffing, all of that would be good to understand as well. So with that direction,
will do.
I would ask for a roll call vote on this item.
Very well. Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Price?
Aye.
That item passes unanimously. Thank you, and thank you for the public for your input on this item. I'd like to move back to item number 2.
Item 2, SAO report relative to proposed amendment number 1 to the 2018-22 Memorandum of Understanding for the Airport Supervisory Peace Officers Unit, MOU 39.
Paul, you're muted.
Better?
Yes.
Check. Paul Gerard, CAO's Office, Employee Relations Division. What you have before you is an amendment to MOU 39, which is the MOU between the City of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles Airport Peace Officers Supervisory Unit. The unit includes airport police sergeants, airport police lieutenants, and municipal police sergeants. The two amendments that are being proposed to the MOU today are, number one, an increase to an airfield bonus for airport police sergeants and lieutenants, and number two, a mechanism to compensate municipal sergeants to ensure that they meet the administrative code's supervisory differential. The airfield incentive or a bonus is a bonus that's paid to airport police lieutenants and sergeants when they are deployed actually onto the airfield itself, or when they are supervising the work of airport police officers who are required to be deployed to the airfield, actually where the planes land and take off. The reason that we are proposing an increase for the sergeants and lieutenants is because in the previous MOU for the officers, the bonus was increased, and so this increase would make the bonus for the sergeants and lieutenants commensurate with the officers' level of compensation. As I mentioned earlier, the additional pay for the municipal sergeants in LAPD is to ensure that administrative code requirements are met, so that no manual process would have to be undertaken to ensure that a supervisory differential is in place for these municipal sergeants when they are supervising LAPD officers. There are 3 municipal police sergeants employed by LAPD, and the bonus would affect only 2 of them because of the way that LAPD structures its operations. The 3rd municipal police sergeant does not supervise LAPD officers. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
I think you answered most of it. I'm just curious, so why are the municipal police sergeants, which are all employed by LAPD and may supervise LAPD officers, why are they represented by the Airport Supervisory Peace Officers Unit?
So they were supervised by LIUNA in MOU 12, or I'm sorry, they were represented in LIUNA in MOU 12, but MOU 12 is almost entirely made up of civilian job classifications. And so to seek representation that was more in line with the work that they do, that of being sworn police officers, they actually asked LIUNA to let them out of that unit, and then the Airport Supervisory Peace Officer Unit was amenable to accreting them so that they could get a representation that's more in line with the type of work that they do. And this is a trend that we saw with the municipal police captains. They used to be represented by LAPMA, and now they are represented by the Los Angeles Police Department Command Officer Association. Similarly, the airport police officers recently took over the representation of the municipal police officers who were formerly represented by EAA. So the trend for municipal police classes has been to seek representation by law enforcement type representative units.
Okay. Other questions, members? If not, I'd ask for a roll call on this item.
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Price?
Aye.
Very good. It is
That
approved.
item passes, and we are adopting the CAO's recommendations.
Thank you.
See, item 3.
Item 3, sale report relative to amendment number 1 to the 2019-22 successor MOU for the confidential attorneys unit, MOU 31.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi, Michelle Upshaw with the CAO's Office Employee Relations Division. Item 3 is an amendment to the 2019 through 2022 contract for MOU 31. And the amendment is to align the benefits and compensation of MOU 31, which consists of the confidential city attorneys in alignment with MOU 29. And the classifications of these 2 MOUs are the same and historically have been paid the same compensation and benefits due to the portability of employees between the 2 bargaining units. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So how many of them are covered by MOU 31?
Currently, MOU 31 has approximately 38 employees.
And how many of them utilize the professional development reimbursement?
For the most part, most, if not all, use at least some portion of the professional development reimbursement. The amount can range, between 50 and 70% of the total reimbursable amount.
And what's a typical program that employees seek reimbursement for?
Primarily, the reimbursement is used to cover the cost of the minimum continuing legal education courses, the MCLE courses, and associated costs with those courses. The new contract expanded the use to include other professional association dues and specialized section courses.
Okay, colleagues, any questions, comments? If not, I would recommend that we adopt the CAO report and its reported recommendations. We could have a roll call on this item.
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Price?
Aye.
That item passes. Item number 4.
Item 4, CAO report relative to proposed amendment number 1 to the 2019-22 MOU for the Management Attorneys Unit, MOU 32.
Hi, Michelle Upshaw again with the CAO's Office Employee Relations Division. Item 4 is the amendment to the 2019 through 2022 contract for MOU 32, which consists of the Management Attorneys Unit. The MOU 32 had a letter of agreement which provides for the same economic benefits as other city attorney bargaining units, if greater. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
And how many employees are covered by this MOU?
Currently, MOU 32 has about 17 employees.
Okay. So I don't have any other questions. Any other questions, colleagues? Seeing none, I'd like to recommend that we adopt the CAO report on this one as well.
Very good.
Roll call.
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Price?
Aye.
That item passes. Item number 5.
Item number 5, CAO report relative to proposed amended 2017-21 Memorandum of Understanding for the Port Pilots Bargaining Unit, MOU 26.
Paul, you're muted again.
I'll get the hang of it eventually.
That's fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Paul Gerard, CAO Employee Relations. What you have before you is a proposed amendment to the current MOU 26 between the Port Pilots and the City of Los Angeles. The highlights of the proposed amendment are as follows. Extend the term that would have ended July of 2021 through July of 2027. Included in that term would be a base wage reduction for Port Pilot 2s, which is the classification that is able to move ships in and out of the port on their own without any supervision. The base wage reduction would last for 3 years. It's approximately 2%. And then in July of 24, Port Pilot 2's salaries would be restored to their current level through the end of the proposed 2027 term. The proposed amendment would also clarify overtime provisions of this document. Currently, the MOU is silent on how the pilots are treated under FLSA, and the proposed amendment would declare an exemption from FLSA provisions, thereby allowing the port to work these individuals more than 40 hours in a work week before they would be eligible to earn overtime compensation. The proposed amendment would also strengthen and clarify the rules regarding how callbacks are treated. It would change the rules around holiday premium pay. Currently, a pilot who works on a named holiday earns 14 hours of additional compensation for working on that day. This would reduce that to 12. And the current MOU actually pays a pilot when they do not work on a holiday, and the proposed amendment would eliminate additional compensation to a pilot who does not work on a holiday. Now, instead of paying pilots on holidays themselves, a bank of time would be created, time in lieu of holiday time, similar to the mechanisms that we have created and the council has adopted for the port police MOUs, the rank and file and the supervisors. So the mechanism is already in 2 of the adopted MOUs that we have currently on the books. The proposed amendment would also modify a mechanism that's referred to as the efficiency incentive in the document. Pilots earn approximately 1/3 of their compensation through this mechanism. The mechanism multiplies the gross registered tonnage of ships that are moved into the port on a biweekly basis times a negotiated percentage multiplied by the port's tariff on moving ships, and divides that number by the eligible number of pilots for this incentive, which would be limited to the Port Pilot 2 classification and pay grade. The proposed amendment would alter some factors in that formula so that pilots would possibly be able to earn greater compensation, mostly due to an increase in ship traffic. So the short is, when ship traffic increases and the port makes more money, the pilots have a better chance of making a share of that profit. Other updates would include bringing the MOU in line with payroll requirements around deductions, grievance procedures, vacation accruals, medical leave provisions, and healthcare contributions. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you would have.
Thank you. I have a couple. So if I understand the Fair Labor Standards changes, they would only get overtime when they've actually worked a full work week, as opposed to just being available to work when there isn't any actual work.
The FLSA counts overtime. The rule is an employee earns overtime after actually working 40 hours in a designated work week. The majority, if not actually all of our MOUs, allow for overtime to be paid to employees after 40 compensated hours in a work week. What the declaration of the exemption does is it alleviates the city from having to pay overtime after the 40-hour threshold. And so we're able to incorporate into this MOU that pilots will only earn overtime after having been compensated for 84 hours in a biweekly period. That is currently the practice today, but the MOU is not as clear as it could be. And so what we did with this opportunity is to strengthen that language to make it absolutely clear how overtime is to be administered in this MOU.
Okay, because I know a certain amount of time is paid to port pilots, as I understand it, for not actually working, but the fact that they have to be available at all times, even if a ship isn't coming into port. But that's doesn't sound like what this is about. It's more just a clarification.
It is a clarification, and I think the issue that you're referring to probably is the callback situation where pilots, if pilots are required, if there are not enough pilots on watch and there are more ships than pilots that are available on a regular schedule, any pilot who is not currently on duty and is available to move ships will put their name on a callback list, and they can be actually called back into work, and there's a mechanism to compensate them for that. What we do not have is standby pay. So we don't compensate someone who leaves the pilot station and is just sitting idly by. They're only compensated if they actually commit to and come in and actually perform the work.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Any comments, colleagues? Hearing none, I ask that we approve the CIO's recommendation on this item as well. We get a roll call.
Councilmember Koretz,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee,
Aye.
Councilmember Price.
Aye. That item passes. Item number 6.
Item 6, Information Technology Agency report relative to an update in regard to the Human Resource and Payroll Project. This matter has also been referred to the Information Technology and General Services Committee.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm Raylan Napper with ITA, and I'm also the city's HRP project manager. I'd like to start by highlighting a couple things that were only alluded to in the report. So the first thing is on working remotely. The city executed the contract with Workday on April 9th, which means 100% of the work thus far has been performed remotely. And I just want to commend both Workday and the city project team for a great job adapting while maintaining the pace and the quality of work. Secondly, I'm really proud of the extent to which the project has already engaged departments. Being remote hasn't hindered our interaction with staff in other departments.
Oh crap, I just turned off the wrong thing yet again. Oh, nuts. Okay, this is a convoluted way to do it. Oh, nuts.
The team and the HR and payroll staff of every department are currently going through 2 to 2.5 day sessions to review the design decisions made thus far. We also had representatives from many departments involved in the 119 design workshops, which is where we made those initial design decisions. So then, of course, we've had 2 town halls, and they reached more people than if we had held them in person. So overall, the project is progressing very well. We're on track with the timeline, we're maintaining the scope, and we've not used any of the contingency funds. So the work streams, which is how we're organized, have moved quickly to design the basics in their individual areas. And now the team is building upon that and adding more complexity and interaction between the functional areas, like using information from human capital area to validate the entries in time tracking. And this is indicative of the iterative nature of this project. And it's also a factor that's enabled the team to accomplish so much in such a short period of time. So, for example, right now, the city has a Workday tenant with data for every employee, and that data is about 80% of where we need it to be. Again, that's data. That doesn't mean we're 80% complete with the project. But we have many business processes and rules that have not only been designed, but actually configured in that tenant. And very soon it will contain logic for every MOU and ad code provision that relates to compensation. So looking forward a little bit, in January, we begin unit testing, and there'll be more robust testing after that. But it's through testing and refining that we'll seek perfection and move towards that 100% accuracy and completeness. And so all this is not to say we haven't been without our challenges. We've worked through several functional and technical issues. But the most severe risks to the project right now are external things that the project team has little control over, such as losing crucial subject matter experts to SIP or having those remaining subject matter experts unavailable because they now have less staff and more work. And the other more direct risks of having less time to do our work because of furloughs, and then also losing team members due to the hiring freeze. So we're certainly doing what we can to mitigate those risks, as outlined in the report, but these are the things that keep us awake at night and truly threaten the timeline. And just a reminder that the timeline is imperative to this project, because going live after the 2022 calendar year and not at the beginning means the city will have to maintain and close out 2 different payroll systems, which increases the effort and the risk quite a bit. So finally, as a result of the current downsizing, we plan to exercise our option in the amendment to reduce the worker count and realize a modest savings on subscriptions in the coming fiscal years. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you. I'm really concerned about the budget constraints and staffing constraints on this. So I wonder if you could walk us through a little more what will happen potentially due to folks lost through the SIP, possible employee loss of time and work hours due to furloughs, difficulty you might have in replacing staff during the hiring freeze, etc. What does that mean to this project, and how problematic could the result be?
Right, and so I'll take those kind of in chunks.
I don't know if you could hear me because my screen has been frozen.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Okay. Can you guys hear me?
I think I was frozen for about 30 seconds. So
Okay.
I don't know if you heard what I asked.
I heard your question. So
Great.
with the SIP, that doesn't challenge the project team directly, meaning we're not losing any team members to that. But instead, those people out in the departments that have some critical knowledge that we might be going to for design advice or decisions, they will no longer be accessible to us. And so we've identified who those people are, and we're having kind of exit interviews with them to see who they've passed on their knowledge to, or who they can very quickly, any resource documents and such that we can refer to. So trying to do what we can to capture that knowledge they have and then transfer it. With the furloughs, obviously the time together to do our work, the time to meet with other departments who also have less time. So, that might make it harder for them to meet with us, and that might push things out in terms of the timeline. Having the furloughs deferred till January helps quite a bit because the crunch of our design phase is wrapping up. So it's a little better timing coming next year than if it had earlier in the fiscal year, but it's still a concern. And then when we lose a project team member, like if they leave to remote or to avoid furloughs or something, then there's a chance that person might not be backfilled, or if they are backfilled, we have to take the time to train them up, get them up to speed, which is time and money. And then all these delays, these things that have a time implication, it could push the project out a little longer. And obviously, if it happens a little bit, we can probably absorb that. But if it keeps compounding, then we have a real risk to the timeline, which means that we might have to just do less in order to go live on time, or worst case scenario, go live later than we expect. And then the risk and the effort is really, really increased.
What about the worst case scenario, which isn't just that we're later, we do a little less. It's that this is a pretty complex undertaking, and there are places that have done it well, and there are folks that have underfunded it and then wound up with massive expenses when it winds up being fouled up. So is there a chance that we could save $500,000 and spend $50 million because we had a massive screw up and sent tens of thousands of people wrong paychecks and such? What's the chance of that?
Well, right now I'd say low. So while we're still working through the budget process for next year, there's a strong commitment for the funding for the project, and hopefully that comes through. So I'm not super worried about that part right now, and I don't. The city still, the people who are talking about the budget still seem to support not undercutting things, not shaving corners and rolling things back. So there's a real strong commitment there, and so that's okay. And then it's just in terms of the people to do the work. And if things are not going well, close to go live, also the steering committee, the executives around this project, everyone's committed that we're not going live unless it's right. We're not going to have those kind of mishaps you've read about in other headlines. So we will take on that risk. We will mitigate the risk if we have to, but starting now, we're really going to try to avoid that.
I'm encouraged to hear that, because that's my worst nightmare with this project. So your worst case scenario, delaying the project, how could that impact the city's finances? How could it impact the city's functionality? What's the downside to that?
Well, the downside is the complexity, because we will have part of a calendar year in one payroll system in Pacer, and then the rest of the calendar year in Workday. So that means maintaining Pacer longer than we expected. And the people who do that are the people that need to maintain Workday. So that's an added stress on them, more effort. And then also to wrap up the books and make the transition kind of midstream, it imposes a little more risk. The best practice is you go live with a new payroll system at the beginning of the calendar year. And of course, if we do overrun our timeline, there will probably be increased costs as well, because our consultants are being kept around longer than they planned. Now, we do have a contingency fund that it's not huge, but we could go into that cushion if needed, and if it's still funded in the future. Like I said, the plan is for it to still be funded. So we're constantly assessing the risks. We try to look far ahead and mitigate as early as possible.
Okay, Mr. Lee, any questions, comments on this? Okay, if not, I will ask that we note and file this report. And thank you for all that information.
Thank you.
We could have a roll call.
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Price?
And I believe that Mr. Price is no longer present.
Okay, very good.
So that item passes. Item 7.
Item 7, Personnel Department report relative to the Ridesharing Trust Fund review for fiscal year 2019-20.
Hi there. My name is Steven Montagna. I'm the Chief of the Benefits Division in the Personnel Department. This is the annual report for the Ridesharing Trust Fund for fiscal year 1920. The purpose of the report is to provide a review of trust fund activity over the course of the fiscal year. This trust fund is used as a repository for parking and van pool fares paid by city employees, and those are used in turn to pay for the city's ride sharing and other transportation benefits such as transit subsidy reimbursement and our van pool program. I will note that we did recently realize we have not been meeting the reporting requirement to council on this, and so with this report, we're now setting up what will be regular, ongoing annual reports to council, very similar to the reporting that we currently provide for the Employee Benefits Trust Fund. Since we were bringing this report to you, we did also take the opportunity to provide a status update on our ride-sharing program, which is, I'm sure you can imagine, has really been turned upside down this year due to the impact of COVID-19. So we did share in our report some of the interesting data that we got from this year's annual AQMD survey, which we did in June, and that provides a comparison of this year's results versus last year's. And as you can see from some of those numbers, we went from really having just a tiny fraction of workers telecommuting last year to now approximately 65% of the workers that were part of our AQMD regulated work sites. So we're also seeing the percentage of people driving alone to work that's been cut in half, and then use of public transportation and other ride-sharing options has gone from a little under 50% to closer to 10%. So we are looking forward to working with and bringing, well, first of all, working with our Joint Labor Management Committee that oversees this program, also bringing on a consultant to help us with the redesign of our transportation benefits for city employees, which will ultimately result in changes to the special MOU on commute options and parking. So we're and of course the plan there, and this is particularly the case with COVID now, is to really take a hard look at what these changes have been and to put together a forward-thinking strategy for what our benefit design really should look like in the future. Quickly, in terms of the net balance in the trust fund, it's approximately 3.4 million, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I've got a couple. It looks like in recent years that fewer employees were receiving the subsidy than were actually using these transportation methods. So were we not communicating the subsidy and educating people well on the opportunity, or was there some other explanation?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. It's always our numbers, and when we do the AQMD survey, our numbers of people who are using means other than driving alone to come to work have always been larger than the number of people actually applying for the incentive that we offer. So we've been making efforts over the years to increase basically the marketing program. We're doing something each year when it comes to certainly when we're issuing the AQMD survey, trying to publicize that information and use that as an opportunity to let people know that we have these benefits, and then doing other campaigns where we can to try to work with them.
And I guess we're looking at using what we know about the current COVID circumstances to make some transportation design improvements. Do we have a sense of what those improvements would look like?
Well, one area we're very curious about is what we think is sort of might be more responsive to the needs of our workforce in an environment where a lot of employees may be continuing to telecommute, and that is some more flexible approaches to parking. So right now we have this model where basically people get a permit, it's a monthly permit, and we are aware that there are other models which are more sort of based on the usage, like when you need to use parking. I think the other what goes along with that is more of a mix and match approach to integrating the use of parking benefits with the use of transportation incentives. Right now, the MOU is written to say you can have one or the other, but you can't have both. But we actually think that probably in the future, having some nimbleness and giving people options would actually help participation and reduce the times, sort of the overall number of people who are driving alone to work.
Great. Mr. Lee, any questions, comments? If not, I'd ask that we note and file this report. We have a roll call on this item.
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Very good.
That item passes. Let's see, item number 10.
Item 10, Personnel Department report relative to creating a program that would provide a pathway to citizenship through city jobs, which seeks to support undocumented city employees through the naturalization process.
Good afternoon. I'm Gina Turbalon with the Personnel Department Client Services Division. And the motion requested the Personnel Department in consultation with the City Attorney and City Administrative Office look into the legality and possibility of creating a pathway to citizenship for undocumented workers. In consultation with the City Attorney, all jobs within the city require an individual to have an authorization to work in the United States. The Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 requires that two basic items are taken care of. One is verification of identity, and two, verification of the right to work. Knowingly hiring an individual who is authorized to be employed in the United States is a violation of federal law. So as such, the city has no authority to eliminate this authorization requirement. As a consequence, Civil Service Rule 3.1 provides that an applicant must have a legal right to work to be qualified for examination and appointment. It's personnel's recommendation that this report be received and filed with City Council. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Let's see. I'd first ask if anyone from Councilmember Cedillo's office is available, and if they have any concerns or questions about the report before we take any action. Anyone present? If not, I certainly would like to do this, and I understand the thought process behind it. However, it seems like we are legally precluded from doing so, and my understanding is that in addition to our violating federal law, this could actually cause some problems in the future for an employee that was hired in violation of this federal law. So I would suggest that we note and file this report, but if we are interested in pursuing this direction, perhaps we could look at seeking a congressional sponsor and supporting such a bill in Congress if we indeed wanted to take the next step. But as far as this recommendation, I would suggest that we note and file the report. Mr. Lee, any other comments? So
no, Mr. Chair.
I would move that recommendation. We could have a roll call.
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Very good.
That motion passes. Item number 11.
Item 11, Personnel Department report relative to preparing a report with a list of city and county jobs that have a legal status requirement in order to begin the conversation on how to hire for these jobs without consideration of an applicant's legal status.
Technical
Good afternoon. My name is Lupe Ortiz. I'm with the Personnel Department. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. There was a sound in the background, and you may hear one now because someone is doing gardening around my home. But hopefully everyone can hear you.
Okay. Well, my report is in response to a motion that was passed asking the Personnel Department to look into the possibility of having city and county jobs waive or not look into the legal status of an applicant. Much like my prior colleague, like she indicated, there is federal law that prohibits the city from doing this. Like you also indicated, in order to move forward and do this, it would require a congressional change or approval, as well as a change in federal law. And this was also discussed with the city attorney's office. I believe Phyllis Henderson from the city attorney's office is on the call, and her and I can answer any questions that you may have.
I would say, again, my thought would be that there appears to be no legal path to taking this action. Lee, any comments on this one? So not very similar to the last item. I would ask that we note and file this report and ask for a roll call.
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
That motion passes. Mr. Clerk, is there anything else before us?
That clears the desk. That clears the desk. Do you hear me?
Thank you. That being the case, we are adjourned.
Very good.